Hey YouTubers, we are back. It is Tuesday afternoon, July 23rd, and my last final exam for the semester is finally over. Feel like a freight train wreck, and it's time to get back to some shooting, some rifles, and having a little fun this summer. We've got the Ruger Precision Rifle and 338 sitting behind me on the reloading bench, and my wicked awesome US Optics banner up on the wall here. Favorite brand of optics, which I'm also a dealer for now. We are a dealer for Terminator brakes. That is our only brake that we carry. There's nothing better on the market. It's just second to none. There's multiple world records associated with Terminator brakes now. They're just an excellent product, and they've been around for a lot of years. And once you own one, once you go Terminator, you never go back, as the saying goes. So what I wanted to talk about today too, because I keep getting questions on whether the Terminator TF is an improvement over the Ruger Precision Rifle 338 brake, the factory brake, and the short answer is yes, definitely a big improvement. If I was to harbor a guess as to the actual reduction in recoil over the Ruger Precision Rifle tank brake, I would say that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25% conservatively over that brake, or 30%, on the top end. But that's not what actually sold me on the brake, because to be honest with you, I was pretty impressed with the Ruger brake. I've got emails back and forth with Greg at Terminator, and despite being an owner of probably 8 or 9 Terminator brakes myself on my own personal rifles, on school rifles, on the Range Tech rental rifles, I was still really skeptical that Greg was going to be able to make the improvement over the tank brake. There are some tank brakes out there that do fairly well. However, I put the brake on. I got the first Terminator TF brake on the planet last year. I had one of the first Ruger Precision Rifles and 338 on the planet, and I put it on and noticed an improvement right away. I would say that I roughly have the recoil of a, AR-15-ish kind of thing. It's definitely not AR-10, it's not SR-25 308 recoil, which is pretty soft. I'd say it's softer than that. But not only is it softer than that, it's a different recoil. It's a softer recoil pulse, and I actually find that's a bit more controllable. And I think that's one of the things about the Terminator brakes that makes them so good. There are other brakes out there, that reduce recoil. Some do it probably more violently than the Terminators do, but there's trade-offs with those brakes. And in one of the brakes I have in hand is actually the first muzzle brake that I had many years ago. Came on a 338. This was the most horrible brake I've ever shot with. This baffle port, whatever you want to call it, basically was just a joke. The recoil on this thing was violent. The explosions out the side of these big ports was massive, and that in itself was violent to anybody standing within 20 feet. And even standing behind you, I had multiple spotters complain about the blast from this brake. We went to the Terminator brakes on that 338 years ago and never looked back. It's one of the things that got me interested in the Terminator brakes at the time, was getting away from this hunk of junk right here. This is a good demonstration though, and it makes a good point in itself in its design, which validates the Terminator in my opinion, because when you have these big open ports, you don't have a controlled venting and jetting, and you don't have an efficient jet that's going to reduce that recoil. What you have out of these things, and you can see lots of competitions where guys are shooting muzzle brakes even with ARs, and they have a blast like this on either side where all that unburned powder is venting out. Yeah, and it's just rude. It's not fun to shoot. I'm sure it's not any better for your hearing than shooting the Terminator brakes with a the more vented or more rear vented system that they have. I mean, it's quite sloped backwards, but it's very, very defined in where it goes, especially compared to something like this. Now, you know, with my Ruger Precision Rifle 6.5, that came with a slightly better brake, but again, it's got this giant port on the front. And it did do a fairly decent job of reducing the recoil on the 6.5. You know, there's not a lot of recoil on a 6.5 in the first place, but you really, if you're getting into shooting a 6.5, chances are you're looking for the absolute amount of recoil reduction, the softest shooting, so that, you know, you can get that second shot on target as well, and the third, and so on, and see where you're impacting and so on. You know, most guys that are shooting 6.5 are not going out and hunting with them because they just don't have that energy and internal ballistics that, you know, some of the bigger calibers do. And, you know, aside from the obvious stuff with the brake, like with the Terminator brakes, there's some other, you know, less recognized benefits to the brakes. There is less sound to the shooter. There's way less sound to the spotter. There's less flash. They act like a flash suppressor just due to their design and the multi-fins that are, you know, coming down the sides of the brake. The ports are smaller, the vents are way more defined, and the vent design itself actually leads to stabilizing the barrel. On top of that, there's the weight issue too. You know, and if you go from the big tank brake on the RPR to this, you are going to have improved harmonics over the tank brake. You know, if you have something like this and you put a big weight on the end of it, and that does this, like a barrel does, and all of a sudden you've got this big weight on the end, that's going to tend to want to flick harder and more violently at the end with that harmonics than a lighter brake does. And what I found personally when I switched over to the Terminator TF was that I went from about 0.035 with my hand loads that I'd actually put together for another rifle. So I want to show you guys how to install this brake, because this is actually a Terminator TF. It's part of a series of Terminator brakes. There's the TE, which is an 18-1 thread. There's the Terminator TA, which is, the TE is Terminator Europe. The TA is a Terminator America brake. That is a 5/8 24 thread, and it's opened up to 338 caliber. And then this is a Terminator TF, and this is, I guess, I don't know, Terminator 2 flipping good for anything else but the Ruger Precision Rifle. I don't know. It's a 3/4 24 thread on the back of it. Uses a lock nut. Self-timing, super easy to install. And I've had this brake on my gun for a while. I took it off because I want to show you guys how easy it is to install these things. And I want to also show you guys how to take the brake off of the Ruger Precision Rifle, because there is a little bit of a trick to it, and it took me a few minutes to figure out what the heck they had done. So here's the brake, or the okay, so here's the factory Ruger Precision Rifle 338 brake. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. And, alright, so here's the factory Ruger Precision Rifle brake. This is the tank style brake. Compared to the Terminator, it is a huge world of difference. To take this brake off, a lot of guys get confused, and me for some reason, I don't know why I got confused. You know, you undo this collar, give it about a half of a turn left to loosen it, and then unthread the brake. That's really it. And I want to show you guys too something really interesting I've noticed with this brake after shooting it for a little while. If you look at that front port there, what you can actually see, that blue, is the reaction from the cleaner I use on the carbon that had built up in that area. And if you look at that, that vent actually goes forward. So what that means is that as this was jetting, it was actually forcing gases forward, which is actually pushing the rifle back, and it's counteracting the effect of this brake. So this is And it's the same with the back port. These ports don't actually like face backwards. They face forwards. They actually vent forwards. So, I mean, you can imagine what the gas is doing. It doesn't take an engineer to figure out that when that is venting forward, it may be stabilizing the barrel, but it's actually pushing the rifle back, or at least counteracting some of that efficiency of the brake. So if we compare the Terminator to the back of it, or to this brake, you can see the Terminator vents all come back at somewhere around 34, 35 degrees. And you can actually see on those vents where a lot of that gas is directed. And that's through here and through here, and you can see there is a little bit of what you're actually seeing there. It's not shadow. You can see where there's actually just a slight buildup of carbon. Now, you can get a worse buildup, I suppose, if you're running way too hot a round or you're not burning all your powder. But this is after about 100 rounds through this, and you can see it's still staying pretty clean. So, anyway, that's the big difference, like right there. Size is also huge in the difference as well, too. Now, yeah, there's an insane difference in the size of these brakes. And I want to say this is roughly 3 times the weight of this. However, I'm not going to use my powder scale to check that. So anyway, let's install the Terminator TF brake on here. So you're going to get some tape, something like this, or even better, some high quality duct tape. And you're going to wrap the flats of the Terminator brake. And this is just done to protect the brake from the actual wrench arms itself. So I'm doing it extra thick because I don't like cutting into the brake when I'm installing these. You don't need a whole lot of pressure and torque when you're installing these though. Blue Loctite, tiny little bit of this. I don't know what is going on with my focus here. Okay, so this is Permatex Blue Loctite. And I'm going to put a drop of that on the threads. And I'm going to run the lock nut up onto the thread, all the way to the back to the shoulder. Now I already had some dry Loctite on this thing, so it's a little bit, the thread's a little bit tough to get it going on here. Normally you won't have this. So I've got a little bit of Loctite on the threads of the lock nut itself. Okay, so I've got the lock nut all the way onto the barrel, right to the very back here, and so it's butted up against the shoulder. And all I'm going to do from there is just follow this on with the Terminator brake. Like I said, it won't be this tight. I had already had this brake installed, so there's still threads are a little bit dirty with Loctite right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this brake on, and I'm going to leave it just a hair short of being perfectly level with the top of the brake or the top of the rifle. I'm going to put some more protective tape on here, and I am going to then take my 2 fancy dancy wrenches here, and I'm going to lock. I'm just going to give it I'm going to bring the lock nut until it's tight. That's it. You don't really need to go any more than that. It does not take a lot of pressure. What you're doing is actually causing a little bit of pressure outwards on the threads. That locks it in place. This is not going anywhere without like tearing the threads off the barrel possibly.